As we wind down the year, I thought it would be the right time to take a trip down memory lane to 1991 and the VTech IQ Unlimited. Welcome to Vintage Geek. I'm your host, Aaron. Each and every week we make videos about vintage computers and technology, so if you like that sort of thing, please like and subscribe. It's going to help us a lot as we grow here. Today I'm taking a trip back to the holidays in 1991 when I was a kid. Now, for those of you who follow the channel, you may know that I started out my computer love with the Tandy Color Computer 2, which my parents got for me when I was about 7 or 8 years old. For someone like myself that liked to tinker and experiment and do a lot of different things with code, it was great. The color computer was an excellent choice. But for the rest of the family and for doing kind of the more standard tasks that you might want to do in the household, like print a Christmas card, for example, or some kind of a fun banner, it was a lot of steps and machinations to go through to make that work on something like the color computer. You had to get into code, or you at the very least had to load a disk or some kind of program. That was a little bit above the skill set of probably most adults that had never used a computer before. So I was interested in finding something at that time that the whole family could use. And when the ad came up in the 1991 Sears catalog for the VTech IQ Unlimited, I thought, well, this could be the solution. Now, we've talked about VTech here on the channel before. They made the Laser 128, which we've done a brief review on, and was a pretty good Apple II clone. They were definitely into the consumer electronics arena, and they had a lot of products that were geared at children and kids, and various educational toys and software. In 1990, they started developing the IQ Unlimited. This computer is essentially an all-in-one system. It uses a Z80 processor, which at the time was actually fairly slow already by then, but it actually had a ROM built in that had 12 basic programs. So you had your word processing, your spreadsheet, all of those basics that you would need in the household, and it was all just available on the computer without loading any disks or additional accessories. So this seemed like a pretty cool concept, and especially when you considered the price. Now, in the catalog at the time, if you were looking to get any kind of an IBM PC compatible machine, you were talking anywhere between $600 and $1,000. Whereas the VTech IQ Unlimited, which could connect to your standard television set at home so you didn't have to buy a monitor, we were able to pick up a set like this for $200. I do remember being very excited about trying this system out, given the capabilities that it had all built in to the system without any external interface. So I'm kind of excited to go back on this trip down memory lane. I haven't touched one of these computers since that time, so let's get into it and see what we can do with this IQ Unlimited. We have a basic case here. One of the things I noticed right away is that there's an LCD display on the top. Now, this computer was meant that it could actually run in LCD mode or screen mode. I don't remember actually ever using this in LCD mode. It's very limited, as you would imagine. There's only a single line of text. Now, I suppose if you're writing a basic program or something, that would be fairly useful. And certainly because the machine actually can run off of just battery power, I guess it technically makes it a portable machine. There's a basic contrast control here for the light setting for the actual display. There's only 2 positions, so in my experience, it's basically either you can see it or you can't, depending on the light settings in the room. The keyboard itself, it's a layout that's similar to a normal keyboard. There are some special function keys. Notably, the keys here in the center all seem to have mathematical functions on it, so these might be used for the calculator program, I'm guessing. There's a control and an alt key, but they also say left and right player on them, so I guess that must be for one of the games that came with the system. It does have a full numeric pad over here on the right-hand side, which is a nice feature for a cheap computer at the time. And to be honest, the keys feel fine. They don't feel like early membrane or anything like that. They seem usable. The spacing is decent. There's no real home position indicators on the keyboard, so that might make touch typing a little bit challenging. There's the VTech logo on the top that shows the brand, and then of course the IQ Unlimited computer branding here on the top section. And if we look at the side here, there actually is an expansion slot. I don't think they ever actually produced real expansions for this other than a memory expansion, which we actually do have the memory expansion cartridge. Now, I also read that this was compatible with the Socrates type software and games. I would imagine a company like VTech would probably reuse a lot of their tech in their products, so it would make sense that it would have that compatibility. And on the back, we've got a standard parallel printer port, and this is important because, as I recall, it would work with pretty much anything as far as dot matrix printers at the time. I remember specifically we had the Tandy dot matrix printer that we had with the color computer, and it worked just fine. It's got your power input for an external power adapter. It's 12-volt type. It's also got the composite video out, which is what we're going to use today. I think it'll give us the better quality video other than the RF TV out, and that's where you could use channel 3 or 4 on a standard television set. There's also this door here for another type of expansion slot. This kind of has an edge connector on it. I don't know what that was for. If any of you out there are familiar with the product and you know more info on that, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. On the final side here, we simply have a power switch for off and on, and really that's all there is to it. On the underside of the unit, there's two battery compartments. One's used for the batteries that can actually power the unit, and the other ones are for the clock backup, retaining the date settings and so forth. This thing is very lightweight, and it does have a handle. It was definitely designed to be quasi-portable. You could take this to a relative's house and potentially plug it into their TV or use it in LCD mode, so it has some versatility there for sure. I do remember taking one of these to my grandparents' house at the time and using it on their television, so that intention came true for sure in our case. I should mention at this point that this is not the actual IQ Unlimited that I had when I was a kid. That one is long gone, I think probably sold at a garage sale in the family a few years later. This is one that we acquired off of eBay. So I think we're ready to power this up and see what we can do with it. It's given me a message right away about replacing the main batteries. Unfortunately, this unit does have some corrosion in the battery compartments. I'm going to go without batteries today, and now it's telling me to replace the backup batteries. Also not surprising. Now it's asking me if I want to use it with the TV or the LCD, and I really don't feel like trying to use this whole thing with an LCD display, so let's go with the TV mode. The year, not surprisingly, because the clock doesn't save its memory, is showing 1991. Let's see if this thing is year 2000 compliant, since it is the end of the year, about 23. January 1st, why not? Okay, now we've got a grid of the different applications available. These are all the ones that came standard on the ROM. Now I already know from memory that I use the Art Studio a lot. We printed a lot of things from banners and calendars, etc. But let's see how it handles some of the basic things first and foremost. We go into word processor, for example. It's giving me a choice between 40 or 80 on the screen width. I assume that 80 is going to make it a little bit harder to see, but probably give us a little bit more real estate. And actually, it wouldn't even stay in the 80 column mode, it looks like. I'm going to do a new file here. We're going to call it test. Looks like it's showing the memory that's available in the top right hand corner. So we've got about 24K to play with here, which is quite a bit when you're talking about text. Let me try typing a sentence and see how it feels. I mean, it seems very responsive. The keyboard is fairly easy to use, and it looks pretty good on screen. To get to these menus, you have to go to the escape key, and you can kind of go through these. You've got tabs and margin settings. It looks comparable to most of the word processors at the time. It's no word perfect, mind you, but certainly would get the job done. So the next thing we've got is the spell review. Notice it doesn't say spelling review, it just says spell review. So for all I know, this could be magic spells. Word to check. Let's try to spell something incorrectly and see if it gives us the right suggestion. Vintage, without the A. Just realized I probably should have put a question mark in for the unknown letter. Oh, there it is. Processing time isn't super impressive, but definitely has some basic autocorrect functionality like the modern day iPhone, so that's cool. Although it would be probably more useful if this was in the actual word processor, but I suppose this was prior to that time when that was practical. I would say considering that as one of the 12 programs is a little bit of a reach, but they were working with what they had, and I appreciate that. All right, so now we have the calculator function. Now, see, I think unit conversion could be helpful. Let's do some length unit conversion here. 99 inches. 8.25 feet, 2.75 yards, gives you the answer in miles, chains, furlongs, leagues. It's pretty comprehensive, I like that. Look at the volume, 20 US fluid ounces. Gives you all the conversions right there. Again, it's a little bit slow. This is a Z80 processor, which at the time was, pretty dated already. The Z80 was used all the way back into the late 70s. But again, this was a cost-saving unit, and I'll give credit where credit's due. Next up, we have something called Mind Challenge. Let's give this a shot. Oh, it's a nice little tune. All right, so we've got science, geography, trivia, and history. Well, actually, we technically have geog because apparently they couldn't fit geography into that square. So let's see what we can do with a little bit of trivia. We'll do one player. This is probably where that left and right player thing comes into play. And there's apparently 2 levels of difficulty. We'll go with level 1. Which invention allows the blind to read with their fingertips? Braille. Which company first invented the electric razor? It says if you hit help, you can get multiple choice. How about Remington then? Nope, still got it wrong. Last question. Cotton gin was invented in 1793 by Eli Whitney. Press any key to continue. Oh, okay, so once you finish a set, it just takes you to the next category of trivia. Got a nice looking screen on it, and I suppose this would create some educational opportunities. I don't know how many questions they have in total built into the ROM, and that's where we get into the limitations of this system, because without having any kind of external drive, there's really not the capability to add additional content unless they would have made expansion cartridges for things like trivia. Looks like they've got another game on here, Word Zappers. So this one has music and sounds. Let's just play. Oh, so it's just typing. Oh, I see. So it's kind of a bust out situation. If you let him go to the bottom, I'm going to try this on a different game level. Let's try level 3. Congratulations, you've just completed the first round successfully. Let's move on to a more challenging round. Well, this round was already challenging, and I can tell you a couple reasons why. One thing is that the color mixing on the actual composite output, it has a lot of artifacts, so it's actually pretty hard to read those words when they're coming down on the screen. I'm not sure what that's going to look like in capture, or if that's going to capture the same way, but looking at it on the actual analog video, it is difficult to read those words as they're coming down, so that does make an additional challenge to typing the words. Secondly, the response time of the keys, since there's so many different words on the screen, which word you're working on is kind of a grab bag situation. Several times when I started to type, I thought I was typing the word that was coming up next, but it started giving me credit for a word that was further up. Let's go ahead and put a name in here. I feel like I did as much as was reasonably possible, being able to see the words in the state that they were on the screen. Now this also has a version of BASIC on it, and we've talked about this in many videos. Obviously there's a ton of things you can do in the BASIC programming language. I do recall using BASIC on this system, and it's fairly functional, works like BASIC on most of the other computers that we've touched on. You have a very limited storage space, so you can keep a few programs built into the ROM, as I recall, but there's a limitation without having some kind of external storage medium. The system also has a BASIC tutor function, which I recall was a way that you could learn some basic programming skills and learn some of the features of BASIC. It gives you some example programs that you can work from, so that's pretty handy, like this computer talk. What is your name? Hello, Vintage. How old are you? I don't want to say. 77. So Vintage is 77 years old. I hope we have fun. If you list the actual contents here, it's going to show you what that looks like. It's a good example and definitely a good starting point if you're just learning BASIC. As silly as it sounds, the 200-year calendar was one of those features that was really a selling point for this system. Now, my mom's a teacher. We've talked about this before on the channel, and taught for many years in elementary school. And one thing that she always liked to be able to do was to print custom calendars based on activities that were going on in the classroom for a given month. This was something that was not easy to do on other systems at the time, and having something built in, like this program does, was definitely a windfall. You've got a uniform grid here that's representing the entire month, and you can go through each day. You can add things to the days. So if I pick number 3 here, I can add an event. Super cool, awesome event. Now it just puts an asterisk next to the date on the calendar, so you can actually look at this in list mode too. In list mode, it's just going to go through the various events, which we only have one. In any case, this was a very early way of being able to put events on a calendar. I'm not going to go into spreadsheets or databases. I think those are fairly similar functions to what you might be familiar with in early DOS machines. Graphs, I don't remember ever using in particular other than just to play with it. We can take a quick look at that. Sample bar chart. We'll just put some random percentages in here, about 55, and let's see what that looks like. Pretty sweet bar chart right there. Again, having the capability of just hooking this up to a standard dot matrix printer and being able to print something like this was a pretty big deal back then, because if you were trying to do this on a color computer, you'd have to do some coding, you'd have to build a program or load an existing one that may have cost additional money. Having this in a simplified form is pretty cool. And now we're ready for Art Studio. We made Christmas cards and banners and that glorious tractor feed paper from the dot matrix printer. I do have fond memories of this program. That was one of the things that I thought was cool about it right off the bat, is that if you wanted to print a card, it actually had a setting for that. Let's see if we can make a card. So at the top menu, you've got your tools, pencil, crayon, eraser, brush, those things that you'd find in a standard paintbrush program. You could do objects. This is one of my favorite things, because if you wanted something quickly, let's say Santa, we can just pick Santa. We'll just put him right on the cover. Oh yeah, what else can we put on this? Other objects here, how about some bells? Let's do some bells. Oh yeah, those are some nice looking bells right there. And finally, we got to put a gift on here. No mouse control, but at the time we weren't even aware of what the mouse was, so not a big deal there. Now let's see if we can put some text in. You got two options, large or small, no font size here. Interestingly though, when I look at this and I see that they had these clip art files and different objects that you can make, I could see this have been a longer term solution for people, because they could easily have put, an entire cartridge full of clip art files similar to what the print shop did at the time. See, there you have it. It's a lovely New Year's card. It's funny to think about how much time I must have spent doing this as a kid, but I have to give credit where credit's due. For a $200 computer in 1991, this has a lot of functionality and certainly was very practical at the time. It's kind of fun to be able to revisit this in this year, and after all this time, Overall, it was a great trip down memory lane. The VTech IQ Unlimited certainly was limited, despite the name that it has, but ultimately it was a good little machine for the money at the time. I really had a lot of fun playing with it today. I hope that you had fun watching it as well. If you like what we're doing here on the channel and like vintage computers, please like and subscribe. It's going to help us a lot as we grow. And I want to remind you too that we have a lot of merch available at the merch store. We've got shirts and coffee mugs and accessories, so check that out. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Aaron. This has been Vintage Geek.